Hi everyone, and thank you for joining our webinar today. Today, Anne and Natalie will be running through AP automation without leaving Sage 300, except where it makes sense to do so. So for example, approving transactions remotely and analyzing accounts payable information remotely. You're all in listen-only mode, so if you do have any questions, please put them into the question box, and at the end, we will be addressing all those questions in the Q&A session. To kick off with, we'll show a video running through the AP automation, and after that, as I mentioned, we'll be going through Q&A. So as the video is running, if you do have any questions, please enter them into the question box. So without further ado, I'll start the video.
Welcome to this presentation on collaboration and automation in accounts payable processes using Sage 300 and Orchid modules. My name is Natalie, and today Anne and I will demonstrate 5 Orchid modules to automate purchase order and accounts payable processes. In our latest blog article, we discuss opportunities to improve efficiency in the AP processes, and I would encourage you to look at the news section of the Orchid website for this article and other interesting articles. When looking at how to make savings on the AP side, attention inevitably turns to improving process efficiency. Automation isn't all or nothing, of course, but if you theoretically jumped from fully paper-based and manual to fully digital and automated, the opportunity would be immense. We've seen studies quoting savings of up to 90% through automation and more digital environment. A recent Avid Exchange blog quoted Goldman Sachs analysis showing a medium-sized business could reduce the cost of processing a single invoice from $16 to $5.89. American Productivity and Quality Center research shows the bottom 25% of performers spend nearly 5 times as much as the most efficient 25%. Those are impressive numbers, but they appear achievable if you start thinking of the time spent tracking down supporting documents to validate and approve invoices, passing that paperwork from hand to hand for approval and check signing, especially in today's work-from-home world. The physical infrastructure needed to store, index, and retrieve those documents for future reference and to meet regulatory requirements. The cost of purchasing and managing custom stationery for checks, remittance advice, etc. And that's just from the time you receive the vendor invoice. What if you looked at all the lead-up processes like raising requisitions and purchase orders? In this webinar, we demonstrate 3 scenarios using Extender Workflow, including the Workflow Anywhere mobile app, document management link and notes to collaborate with team members, EFT processing for payments, and Info Explorer for analysis of purchases and vendor transactions. The aim of today's presentation is to give you ideas as to how you can use Orchid modules in the PO and AP processes rather than demonstrate all the features of the module. The first scenario focuses around purchase approvals using Sage 300 purchase order, and in this presentation we will look at Extender, notes and document management link and how they can help us improve productivity. We will create a PO Requisition in Sage 300 where we have configured Extender Workflow to start the approval process. The user entering the requisition will attach supporting documents to the requisition in Sage 300 using Document Management Link. With Extender Workflow, there are different ways to approve the records. In this first example, the manager approves the requisition on Workflow Anywhere, which is a mobile app to approve Extender Workflow records. We have configured the workflow to create the purchase order automatically when the requisition is approved. The purchase order itself also requires an approval, and this is going to happen on the workflow console on the Sage 300 desktop. but you could also use the Workflow Anywhere mobile app. Finally, we will add a note to the purchase order as it is finalized before it gets emailed to the vendor, and that note will be available for users in Accounts Payable as well. We will then use Extender to create a PDF of the purchase order and email it to the vendor automatically with a single click by adding a new button to the purchase order screen. Over to you, Anne.
In this first scenario, both the requisition and the purchase order need approval. Susan's going to enter a PO requisition and attach the supporting documents. When the purchase requisition is posted, Steve will receive an email notification and will approve using the Workflow Anywhere app. The approval will auto-create the purchase order. Anne will receive a notification that the purchase order has been approved, and she will review the PO and the supporting documentation using the Workflow console. And when she approves the PO, it's going to take the PO off hold. Natalie will receive the email notification that the PO has been taken off hold, and she'll be able to go and open the PO screen and create a note to attach to the PO. A PDF of the PO will be auto-created, saved in the Document Management link folder, and emailed to the vendor. Susan has received an email from her supplier confirming the agreed pricing of $18 for the additional desk lamps, so she's now in a position to enter the purchase requisition. When the requisition is posted, a workflow instance is automatically created and the approvers are notified via email. And Sue's going to attach the email to the purchase requisition for future reference. So here the entire message and Word document is attached in the MSG file, but we can also just attach the individual document, and it's renumbered based on the requisition number. Steve receives the email that the PO requisition number 11 has been created and that the total dollar value is $2,764. For Chloride Systems, vendor 1200. He sees that it requires the manager approval status due to the dollar value, and it was created by Susan on the 7th of November at 14:49. As he is not in the office, he's going to go ahead and approve this using the Workflow Anywhere app on his phone. Using the Workflow Anywhere app, Steve can log on and connect to the appropriate company and view all the workflow instances waiting for him. And here's the requisition number 11. Because he's spoken to Sue about this, he's happy to go ahead and approve. And when a purchase requisition is approved, the purchase order is automatically created. And Sue will be sent an email informing her that the purchase order has been created of her requisition, plus the person who needs to approve the purchase order. Anne receives an email that the requisition 11 has been approved and that the requisition has been converted to a purchase order. And she can click on this link here to view the purchase order. And when she opens up the purchase order, she can see that the purchase order is on hold because the workflow has been started for this purchase order and is waiting for it to be approved before taking it off hold. And it cannot be sent to the vendor until it has been taken off hold. Anne can see the attached documentation from Susan, both the email message, the MSG file, as well as the Word document for the purchase order. And from within Sage, Anne can also work with the workflow console to see all the workflow instances waiting for her approval. And she sees this particular PO number 49 is waiting for approval. From here, she can also drill down to the purchase order to look at the associated attached documentation and any other information that she needs to see in detail on the purchase order. But if this looks okay, she can go ahead and approve. Approving the purchase order will take the purchase order off hold, send an email back to Sue and Steve that the purchase order is now approved. Natalie also receives the email about PO 49 being created when it was approved by Anne, and now she knows she needs to go to annotate this PO and send it to the vendor. And when Natalie opens that purchase order, she sees all the original documentation that Sue attached to the requisition, and the purchase order is now off hold. She needs to create a note for this purchase order. And when the notes are refreshed, this note will be displayed whenever PO 49 is on the screen. And she can now print and email this to the vendor. As part of the printing routine, this document is being saved and stored in the vendor's folder and then emailed to the vendor. And here is PO 49. And Susan Prommer of Chloride Systems receives the purchase order accordingly with the attached document.
Thank you, Anne. These are the modules that we have reviewed in the first presentation. We have demonstrated how Extender can help automate alerts and routine tasks such as printing, notifications and approvals when processing purchase transactions for vendors in Sage 300. Workflow Anywhere provide options to approve records without logging to the Sage 300 desktop for quick approval on any device. And such flexibility helps increase productivity and employee satisfaction. Document Management Link lets you attach files to any screens or records in Sage 300, invoicing the PDF, the documents surrounding the contract surrounding the purchase requisition. And Notes lets you quickly share information among team members, which builds more collaboration and makes sure that relevant information is available at your fingertips where required. In our next example, we will look at how to improve visibility and efficiency when the finance team processes payments using EFT processing and Extender. The focus is going to be on using EFT processing to do electronic funds transfer and streamline the payment processes. We start with AP invoices, and we'll show you how we can view all the supporting documents from the underlying purchase order and the requisition while working with the AP invoice. We will highlight some security features of EFT processing and the separation of duties so that different users enter the bank details and others approve those bank details. So the user who sets up the vendor's bank details in EFT cannot make it active to ensure compliance. To make the process simpler and quicker, we also use Extender to notify approvers that a vendor is ready to be set up. And we also use Extender to approve all batches before the payment is actually processed. And we will do this on the Extender workflow console in the Sage 300 desktop. Finally, we'll demonstrate uploading the EFT file directly to the bank's SFTP site and emailing the remittance advice from EFT automatically to the vendor. Over to you, Anne.
In this second scenario, the EFT vendor details and the AP payment record needs approval. The purchase order has been received and invoiced, and the accounts team are going to review the AP invoice, including the supporting documentation in Document Management Link and in Notes. Sue then sees she needs to create a new EFT vendor record, which alerts Steve to approve the vendor's details, the EFT vendor details. And Sue also creates the AP payment batch, which also requires approval. And when Anne approves the AP payment batch, the batch is posted, which makes the batch available to create the EFT file. Sue receives an email accordingly and creates the EFT file, which is automatically uploaded to the bank's FTP site. And then she emails the vendor the remittance advice. Sue is reviewing the vendor activity for vendor 1200, and when she looks at the document details, she sees both the details associated with the vendor, all the documents that have been attached, together with the notes that are associated with the purchase order. And she notes that this vendor needs payment by EFT. And if she drills down to the detail, she still sees all the vendor documentation, the note as well, together with the isolated or itemized requisition details from this particular invoice / PO and receipt. So Sue's going to create the EFT vendor details for vendor 1200. And because Susan does not have the authority to approve the EFT vendor's details, they will remain as entered, and Steve has been alerted via an email saying that he needs to come and approve these vendor account details. And she's going to go ahead and create the AP payment batch too. When the AP vendor is identified on the batch, the same documentation can be displayed around the AP payment entry that we saw during the AP vendor activity. So we can see all the documents that are associated with that particular vendor, and we can apply the payment to that invoice for purchase order number 50. Workflow has been configured that whenever an AP payment batch is posted, it is automatically submitted for approval before the posting can take place, and the accounts group will be alerted accordingly. Steve receives the email to tell him that Sue has created a new EFT vendor record which he needs to go and approve. And when he logs into Sage 300 and runs the EFT vendor screen, the only field that he is able to change is the status of the vendor. He can set it to active or inactive. He cannot change any of the other details. So this is EFT's separation of duties. One person can enter the details and another person needs to approve the details before the EFT details can be used in an EFT file. In the meantime, Anne receives an email that AP payment batch number 58 has been submitted for her approval. It was submitted by Susan at 4 o'clock. When Anne goes to her workflow console, she sees the AP payment batch waiting for approval. She can drill down into the AP payment batch and see any of the documentation that is associated with the payments that have been created. If she is happy with these details, she can go ahead and approve on the workflow console. And approval will automatically post the AP payment batch and email Sue that the payment batch has been approved and posted. Sue receives a notification that the AP payment batch has been posted, so needs to go ahead and create the EFT file. So back in Sage 300, Sue can go to Create EFT File for payment batch number 58 and click Create. Because this bank has been configured to SFTP the file, as the file is created, it is FTP'd directly to the bank's site. And now the EFT remittance advices can be emailed to the vendor. First is a print preview to check the format. And then by selecting the vendor's or customer's print destination, specifying an email template ID, the emails can be sent to the vendor.
In our second example, we focused on vendor transactions, approving accounts payable payment batches and EFT vendor details using Extender and EFT processing. The documents that we attached in the purchase order were available when looking at the accounts payable transactions, but you can also attach documents to any other screen, so you could also add the documents as you are processing the AP invoice or the AP payment, depending on what documents you want to track. We have used the workflow console in the Sage desktop to approve workflow, but you can also use the Workflow Anywhere mobile app to approve any of those records available on the console. So EFT processing ensures the more secure data, and the separation of duty is a great compliance tool for the auditors. In our last presentation, we will demonstrate how you can use Info Explorer to analyze Sage 300 data, in particular your vendor purchases and AP transactions. Info Explorer is a powerful business intelligence tool, a bit like a pivot table in Excel, connecting to your Sage 300 data and other ODBC databases such as Sage CRM if required. You can change the dimensions in your analysis, such as the vendor group, the country code, the fiscal year or period. You can view the summarized information and drill down to more details, including the ability to drill through to the underlying Sage 300 screen, where you will then see the notes and documents that might have been attached to the transactions. In this example, we will show you how you can use cubes to analyze vendor purchases and GL transactions in a flexible manner. You can also use Process Scheduler to refresh and distribute the cubes automatically for an even greater automation. Over to you, Anne.
In this third scenario, we're going to look at the analysis of your accounts payable data, and we're going to use Info Explorer. The first cube we're going to have a look at are the outstanding purchase orders, and we're going to see how you can use Info Explorer to manage your outstanding purchase orders. You can add Info Explorer to your Sage 300 desktop if you want to launch Info Explorer from within Sage 300, or you can run it from your taskbar, or add it to your desktop, or run it from your start bar. But you do not need a Sage 300 LAN pack to run Info Explorer, only when you drill through to underlying transactions, which I'll show you shortly. And I'm now going to open my PO Analysis cube. A cube is based on a query to your Sage 300 company database and consists of dimensions, these boxes with black text, and dimensions are things you analyze your data by, so we can analyze our data by purchase order number, by purchase order date, by the detail on the purchase orders, by the vendor number, and so on. And these boxes with blue text are the facts, the things you're going to analyze. So at the moment we're looking at the purchase order quantity and the purchase order extended amount in functional currency. If we wanted to see these purchase orders in source currency, we could drag down the PO outstanding source amount. And if we wanted to see which vendors these purchase orders were for, we could drag down the vendor number. And now we've got our purchase orders grouped by vendor. Or if we had dragged vendor to the left-hand side, we would see the vendor for each of the purchase orders assorted by purchase order number ascending. And you can drag and drop to see which dimensions you want as rows or columns, or you can use views to save pre-stored views on the data. For example, this is showing us our purchase orders by location, and if we wanted to see the vendors here, we could still drag the vendor down here. And now the purchase orders are grouped by vendor within each location. And if we wanted to see the breakdown by the purchase detail, we could drag down the purchase detail, and now we see the items per purchase order number, per vendor, per location. And the views can have different collections of your rows and columns, but can also have pre-filters applied. For example, if I look at our purchase orders by expected arrival date, we can see that we have 2 purchase orders which were due prior to today's date, 3 purchase orders which are due in the next 30 days, and 1 purchase order which is due in 89 days' time. And I know this because the days from expected arrival is calculated from the purchase order expected arrival date on the line and the system date when the cube is refreshed. And to make the analysis easier, you can apply styles or colors to your facts. So we have a style called late arrival, which is red, arrive in 30 days, which is orange, arrive in 60 days, which is yellow, and arrive after 60 days, which is green, and then applied it to our fact. So if the number of days between today and the arrival date is negative, then we apply the red color, late arrival. Between 0 and 30 days, we apply orange, 31 and 60, yellow, and greater than 60, it is green. Giving you traffic light reporting to assist your analysis. And you can also apply filters to your views. In this case, we are filtering where the days from expected arrival are less than 0 and the outstanding quantity on the purchase order is greater than 0. So you can apply filters to any of your facts on the cube. If we were to turn this filter off, we would see all the purchase orders. Turning the filter on again, we're seeing only those purchase orders where the quantity outstanding is greater than 0 and the expected arrival date is in the past. In this view, the expected arrival date is in the next 30 days, and in this view, it is greater than 30 days. And depending on your rows and columns, you can also drill down or drill through from the cube into the underlying company database. So if I was concerned about this PO, which is 12 days overdue, I could right-hand mouse button and say drill through to the purchase order number PO 75. At this stage, it asks me to fill in my user ID and password to the Sage 300 company database, and I am subject to security in the Sage 300 security setup. And it's only at this point that I am using a LAN pack in Sage 300. So I drilled through to the purchase order number 75, and we will see any notes or documents associated with the purchase order or requisition number that we had attached previously. And apart from managing your purchase orders in terms of expected arrival date, you can also use a cube such as this to manage those purchase orders which have been received and not fully invoiced. So you could contact the associated vendor regarding this purchase order for outstanding invoices. We have just seen how you can use Info Explorer to analyze open purchase orders. Now we're going to have a look at some accounts payable cubes, AP Open Payables and AP Payable Analysis across multiple companies. This time I'm going to open my required cube from my recent documents list. So apart from having views, which is different collections of the same data with different rows and different columns, you can also have charts. So charts are created from a view, and you can have a pie or bar or line chart depending on the data that you're looking at, which is most appropriate. So this is a chart by vendor group. This is a chart by the ranks of the vendor groups, and this is a total outstanding chart showing us what is due next month, due next 2 months, due greater than 2 months. And your views and charts can be collected together onto a dashboard. You can change the elements of your dashboard if, for example, rather than the ranked outstanding by year view, you'd rather see your aged outstanding by vendor. You can close that particular view and then drag in the required view. And this is still interactive. So if I wanted to sort my vendors by my amount due, I can still do it on the dashboard itself. And having a closer look at our aged outstanding by vendor, looking at those invoices raised in the year 2022, we can see the amount due, if it's overdue or not, due in the current month, due in the next month, due in the next 2 months, or greater than 2 months. So the amount due has been aged based on the invoice due date. Another view of this data is showing us the amount due by invoice date by vendor. So this is the amount due for 1350 invoices raised in 2021 and invoices raised in 2022. Because we're still in early 2022, there's still a few invoices we need to pay for 2021. Info Explorer allows you to add formulas to the data. So we can, for example, add a formula called percentage of column. So this is showing us the amount due as a percentage of that column. So this is 37%, 18%, 37%. Similarly, this is showing us the percentage of 2022's amount due for each of the vendors. And you can sort by your calculated fields For example, I can sort my vendor by percentage of column in total, showing us 7,900 is our largest in total amount due. Or we could have sorted by 2022 or 2021. And the percentage of column is a formula added to the cube, and it's showing the amount due as a percent of the column. Another type of formula that can be easily added to your cubes is a ranking. And this formula is ranking our amount due. So this is the largest amount due, second largest, third largest, fourth largest in 2021, and similarly for 2022. So we can sort by our amount due as well. This is the largest vendor amount due in 2022, and so on. And the vendor rank is based on the amount due fact in descending rank. And these are the typical formulas that you use in cube viewers. They're useful for analyzing your data. The number of records, the minimum or maximum value, an average value, and an ascending and descending rank. So I'm just going to sort by amount due in descending rank across my total. And now I'm going to group my vendors by vendor group. And when I turn on my row totals, you can see it is now ranking our vendor groups as well as ranking the vendors within the vendor group. And if we were to collapse our vendor codes, you now see the vendor groups are being ranked. So your calculated fields are recalculated based on the rows and columns that you're currently looking at. And on any total, you can double-click to drill down into the components that make up the total. So this intercompany balance is made up of 2 AP invoices, whereas this balance here is made up of a number of different invoices. And from the drill down, you can always Control-C and Control-V if you need to copy this list of invoices to Excel. And from any view, you can also export to Excel, HTML, or a CSV if you want that particular calculation of data in an Excel spreadsheet or in a CSV file or in an XML page. Just expanding again to look at our vendors. Not only can you drill down, as we've seen, to see the underlying transactions, you can also drill through. So in this case, I am seeing the vendor number, and I can drill through to the AP vendor activity. And when I drill through, I need to provide a Sage 300 user ID and password. And at this point, I am using a Sage 300 LAN pack to open up the associated vendor activity record. And I can see any documents that have been attached to this vendor. And if I look at any of the transactions, if these detailed documents have been attached, I can see them here too. And just as we can do this analysis across one Sage 300 company database, we can analyze across multiple Sage 300 company databases. So this AP Purchases by GL Account multi-company cube is designed to run across 2 Sage 300 company databases. So here we have our purchases by distribution code and a graph on that, by currency, and a list of all our vendors and their relevant invoice amount. And this view is showing us our total purchases by year across the companies. So 2019 in Orc Limited and Orc Inc. 2, 2021 in Orc Limited and Orc Inc. 2, and 2022. And we can drill into the distribution codes to see the vendors and the individual documents within that too. And as with the other cubes, right-hand mouse button, but this time we can drill through to the AP invoice entry or to the AP vendor activity. So if we drill into the AP invoice entry for Orc Limited, it takes us back to the AP invoice entry screen and we can see the original transaction. And had this come from purchase orders, we would have been able to drill back through to purchase orders too. We have now reviewed some of the sample cubes for accounts payable. And in our last example, we're going to look at a general ledger transaction cube. And we're going to see how we can drill through back to the original GL journal entry. Opening this cube, I'm going to access it through my recent list. And this is a cube on the general ledger, showing us all the transaction details, trial balance, the income statement summarized by account group, the balance sheet summarized by account group, and then some different analysis slices, one showing us account group by region, accounts by source code, and the balances by source code and type. So if you are needing to analyze by GL source code or source ledger, you can use this kind of cube as well. But looking at the income statement, if I just filter the account groups to our revenue and expenses, I can use these dimensions to analyze the data closer. If I want to see the account segment, I can drag that down. So now I'm seeing the natural account. Turn on my display, my row totals. And then perhaps I could see my divisions as my columns. And now I'm seeing the split of my revenue and expenses across the commercial division and the retail division, and where no division was used. And if region was important too, we could drag region down and see within commercial the 4 regions, within retail the 4 regions. This particular cube has also got the formatted GL account number, so if you want to see the full general ledger account number, you can. And this is showing you the division and the region in the structure. But we also have the batch entry. So if in the revenue we were worried about this particular balance, we could just filter to look at only the revenue group, just to make our view a little bit smaller, and we could pull down the batch entry. And then now we can see the different balances posted to this account. And if this number was of interest to us, we can right-hand mouse button, and this time we can drill through to the general ledger account or to the GL batch itself. So it's batch 131, entry 1. And here we see the original batch entry that created this particular batch. And if this batch had come from purchase orders or from accounts payable or accounts receivable, we could drill back to the source ledger too. So if we filter the account group to cost of sales and then drill in to batch 180 entry 5, we see this entry came from accounts receivable, and we can drill down back into the AR batch too. We've now seen an example of GL analysis, including drill down to the Sage 300 GL journal entry screen, and where appropriate, drill back to the AP or AR entry. If needed, you can also use Process Scheduler to refresh the cubes automatically and email them to team members. So you may want to have cubes that are refreshed on a recurring schedule, for example, AR and AP cubes sent every Monday morning, daily sales sent at 6 p.m. every night, and the general ledger on the 15th and the 31st of the month.
Thanks, Anne. We've looked at a range of cubes to analyze purchase orders, AP transactions, and GL transactions. With Process Scheduler and Info Explorer, users can open the cube from their email, review the data in the cube without having to log into Sage 300. If they can access Sage 300, they can also drill through to the underlying transactions and view the relevant notes and documents linked to those transactions. Again, Orchid modules provide choice to users depending on how they want to work with Sage 300. To get started, you can use Info Explorer Lite to try using the sample cubes connected to your database. Check the Orchid website for details. Overall, in this presentation, we've demonstrated 3 scenarios around purchase and vendor processes using Sage 300 and various Orchid modules. To help improve productivity using alerts and notification that are automated, the information is available when needed. You have a choice of the method to approve. Repetitive tasks such as filing and emailing documents can be automated. This then generates improved service delivery through consistency, speed, error reduction with better information using notes and document management link, automated processes using Extender. And then you have better information on the stock coming in. With increased transparency thanks to alerts and analysis using Extender and Info Explorer, shared information in notes that are stored visible in Sage 300 instead of being kept in everyone's emails. And the processes can also be supported by Extender workflow. So you know who is supposed to approve a record, approve a transaction to complete the process. All these are cost-effective tools to help you build resilient processes and implement continuous improvement in ever-changing environments. Thank you for your time, and now we're ready for questions on the presentation themselves, the different scenarios, and all the modules that we have demonstrated today.
Right, well now what we'll do is move through to the Q&A, but before doing that, just to let you all know that we will be sending you a link to the recording of this webinar, so keep an eye out for that in the next few days. And in the meantime, what I'll do is pass control over to you, Anne.
I'm hoping you can see my Sage 300 screen.
Yes, we can. Thanks for that. Got some questions here. So the first question for you, Anne. You have shown how we can automate AP. Can we do something similar for AR?
Yes, we can. So in the first few presentations, the first 2 scenarios, we showed requisitions and purchase orders being approved. So similarly to configuring Extender workflows around requisitions and purchase orders, you can do the same thing around order entry orders. So maybe all orders go on hold, or maybe only if the margin is below a certain percent, the order goes on hold, and then the workflow process takes the order off hold once approved. And then you can so workflow works at any transaction level that has an on-hold status. So with purchase orders, we were using this on-hold status. When the purchase order was created, automatically put it on hold, and then approval takes it off hold. So any transaction that has an on-hold status, like sales orders or some of the inventory control transactions, definitely requisitions and purchase orders, you can use workflow around that flag to put it on hold, and then approval, and only approval through the console or Workflow Anywhere app or remote action service can take it off hold. But we can also use the on hold flag for any master file. So you could have your customers or your items or your vendors, general ledger accounts requiring approval before the account becomes active and can be used in transactions. And we can also set work around the ready to post status on batches. So your AR invoice batches or your AR receipt batches might need approval before they can be posted. So out of the box, Extender can do workflows against any master file, any transaction which has a status, an on hold flag or an active status, as well as any batch, general ledger, AR, AP batch that needs approval. Working with the ready to post status, we can prevent posting until approved on the console.
Right, next question, this time relating to Info Explorer. Can you drill through from Info Explorer when user logins are set to Windows authentication?
No, at this stage, so let me just look at a transaction details. At this stage, when you right-hand mouse button to drill through, you need to connect to your Sage 300 database using a Sage user and password. It is on our list to have a look at Windows authentication. So, keep an eye on our website. We will get to it as soon as we're through our more urgent tasks at the moment. Yeah.
Right, next question. Are the workflows already pre-written in Extender, or do you have to start from a blank slate each time?
The workflows are not they're not hard coded. So the workflows are driven by these templates that you have. So for example, the purchase order one requisitions that I was demonstrating, this is the template. So it's not predetermined how the workflows work. You create these templates. But yes, we do have a number of examples on our website. And if I can find the F1 key, if you go to either to the F1 help or to our online help, you will be able to find a number of example templates that are in our help. So the workflow tutorials. So we've got a number of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 up in our example help. So if you go here, you can download the templates from the help and also have a look on our website in the resources area. We've got some other examples there. Also, just contact us because we can point you in the right direction depending on what you're trying to, what documents or what master files you are trying to work with.
Right, thank you. Next question. Can you access the workflow console remotely?
Yes, you can. So in the presentation, I demonstrated accessing workflow anywhere. So we were accessing the workflow console using Workflow Anywhere, which is a device, which is an app that runs on your mobile device, iOS or Android or Windows. And then you log into the app, and it showed us the entries on the console, which was assigned to me either as a user or by virtue of what group I'm in. And Steve, I think, approved a PO requisition through the Workflow Anywhere app. So that requires you to install IIS, and the app connects through to the Sage 300 company using IIS. But we also have remote action service, so that instead of accessing the Sage 300 database through IIS, the remote action services pushes a page to do your approval or rejection on an AWS hosted site that we host, and then you just click on a link from your email, which takes you directly to the site. And for more information on remote action service, you can find it on our website if you just go to the remote action service. So the workflow templates can create a page on the, push a page up to the AWS service, and then from the email you can just link to that page and approve or reject. And then either by manually launching the retrieval process in Sage 300 or by using Process Scheduler to schedule it on a time schedule. Periodically, you withdraw the, you pull down the approvals and rejects into Sage 300. And using Remote Action Service, you're not using IIS, you're not having to open your Sage 300 company to the internet at all, because it's all done through a push. So the extender pushes the Remote Action Service form up, and Process Scheduler or Remote Action Service reaches out to this site and pulls back down the responses. So a far more secure setup for those people who don't want to expose their Sage 300 company to the internet.
Right, thank you, Anne. I don't see any other questions, so we might wrap it up there. Just a reminder that we will be sending you a link to the recording in the next few days, and just to say thank you very much for attending the session today, and hopefully we'll see you at the session next month.
Thanks for attending. Speak to you next month. Bye.
Bye.